Hi, I'm Eddie. Welcome back to Man of a Certain Age. If you don't already know, I'm in my 50s and signed up for my first triathlon, which is scheduled for the end of April. It's week 2 of my 5-week training block leading into the event. Today, I want to talk about week 1. I want to look back at week 1, what I did in week 1, and then I want to talk a little bit about anxiety, what I'm experiencing, and what I'm doing about it. And I'm going to end by looking at running, which is my weakest discipline by far. So let's dive into it. Let's look at what I did in week 1. I'll put up some numbers so that you can see. But basically, my total training last week, in week 1, was 7 hours. I ended up doing 2 bike sessions, 2 runs, 1 swim, and 1 session of strength training. My typical strength training session is done at home in my living room. I do simple bodyweight exercises and use these power bands. Strength training is important, triathlon or not. There's a lot of science around strength training being beneficial for endurance athletes, but even for anybody that's not, training for a triathlon, strength training is important. Men, as we age, we tend to lose lean muscle mass. So whether you're training or not, it's important to get in your strength session. Let's dig a little deeper into my week 1 training. I mentioned before that I'm following a 80-20 training plan, polarized training, which is spending about 80% of my time in lower intensity and trying to do 20% of my time in higher intensity zones. Again, as I mentioned before, I'm using a 5 heart rate zone approach to track my training. And looking at my week 1 numbers, I was pretty much on track, spending close to 80% of my time in zone 2, which is the lower intensity zone. But I didn't hit my higher intensity zone. So what happened? I got sick. I caught a cold. I probably got it from my kids. I've got 2 boys, they're 10 and 4, and I love them to death. But the fact is, they're basically 2 walking bags of germs after spending the whole day at the German hothouse, otherwise known as schools. But you know what? Life happens, so we need to adapt. I ended up taking it easy for most of last week after 1 high intensity session at the early part of the week, and spend most of the week in the lower intensity zone 2 training just to try to get over the cold. So another thing I noticed in week 1 was that I wasn't sleeping very well. I use an Apple Watch to track my sleep, and I could see that things were off. Sleep is critical to performance. There's a lot of science out there about poor sleep leading to poor performance, as well as decreased recovery and an increased risk of injury. So what's happening? Why am I not sleeping well? Of course, the kids were sick, like I said. A couple of nights they were up coughing all night, but I don't think that's it. I think it has to do with anxiety around the event. Knowing myself, I don't think the anxiety is rooted around the triathlon, the event. I think it's more to do with going down the rabbit hole of the what if. I do this in my working life as well. Sometimes I get anxious before business presentations or important meetings, and I always think about what if this, what if that. The way I deal with this is to borrow something from sports psychology, where there's a concept of focusing on what you can control and letting go of what you can't, and then coming up with some action plans around what's controllable. I can't control any number of things, from the weather on the event day to maybe mechanical failure on the bike. But there are things that I can control, and I've been focusing specifically on about four of these things. The first bucket of things that I can control, what I can take ownership of, is avoiding getting sick. Now, I can't control germs or viruses, but what I can control is putting back the COVID protocols, meaning masking up in indoor spaces and closed spaces with a lot of people, on public transportation like buses and subways, and also frequent hand washing. The second bucket of what I can do is around logistics. So that means everything from getting my transportation in place. I already have train tickets, getting lodging locked down, figuring out how to transport my bike from here to the event. And it also includes things like packing, what to pack for the trip, what to have in each of the transition bags, having all these things written down so that nothing is left to chance. And the third is knowing the course. I've been spending a lot of time on YouTube looking at past events to get a better handle on the event and the surroundings. And also I've been spending a lot of time on Google Map looking over the bike and run route. And the last bucket is feeding plan. This event is going to be around 3 hours and I need to eat. I need to feed. There's a ton of stories out there about famous bonks from the cycling world, for example, in the 2000 Tour de France. Lance Armstrong and his famous bonk on the Col de Joux plan, where he lost a ton of time on that last climb of the day. Even last year's tour, Tadej Pogačar, he mentioned that on several of the climbing days, he pointed to poor feeding as the reason for him losing time. So nutritionists recommend anywhere from 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour during an endurance event. And that works out to about 2 gel packs per hour. So I've been practicing eating. 45 minutes into each workout session, I'm trying to simulate getting off the bike. I start feeding. And every half hour, I try to take a gel. I'm also experimenting with what gels work for me. I'm also trying out different homemade gel recipes, which I'll share if I find something that's useful. So hopefully through this exercise, I'll be able to rein in my anxiety a little bit leading into the event and sleep better. Okay, so the last topic for today is running, which is by far my weakest discipline. Running has always been the thing that held me back from doing triathlons. I'm a slow runner, but it's more that running has historically caused a knee pain for me, more than how fast or how slow I run, that stopped running for being a regular part of my exercise routine. But then about a year ago, I read a book called Born to Run. It's a great book. It's very well known and I highly recommend it. There are a lot of great things about the book, but the main takeaway I got out of the book was that humans are built to run, which means that I too can run. And there's got to be a way for me to run that's pain-free, that doesn't cause me knee pain. So I did a lot of research and I consulted my running coach, YouTube. And it turns out that there are 3 things that cause most of the pain that comes from running. They are 1, heel striking, 2, overstriding, and 3, slow cadence. Now I was guilty of all 3. So starting from about 10 months ago, I started to try to rebuild my running form from scratch. I also got an Apple Watch, which tracks a lot of metrics that I care about. And I focused on 3 things to try to improve and rebuild my running form. The first was to change my foot strike. Instead of landing my heels, as I used to do, to land on my forefoot. The second was that I focused on shortening my stride so that I would land with my feet more underneath my body rather than out in front. And the last thing I focused on was my cadence to try to increase my SPM. And of the 3, I think cadence is probably the most important because it leads into the other things. The faster your foot is turning over, naturally you're going to stride shorter, and it's harder to overstride to get your weight out in front of your body. I put up this chart that you can see that tracks my SPM historically. You can see where I consciously try to increase my SPM. I started out trying to get it to above 170, but I ended up landing right around maybe 165 or so from the mid 140s I was at before. And it seems that mid 160s seems to be where my body is comfortable with. And these changes made a huge difference. My knee pain has largely gone away. I still get aches and pains and soreness here and there, but those are so associated with fatigue rather than kind of the debilitating pain I used to feel where before I had to stop running altogether. And this change, this improvement in my knee pain from running is really the impetus for me to try to do a triathlon. I've always biked and swam, but now that I can run pain-free, I decided to try for a triathlon. So let's take a look at my running form. To do these videos, I bought myself a Insta360 camera, and last week I filmed myself running. It's actually the first time I've ever seen myself run using my new running form. Let's see how I look. It looks like I'm so focused on getting the proper form. I look kind of robotic. I kind of look like Genki Sudo. Ugh, my running form doesn't look natural or relaxed at all. It doesn't look very athletic. But you know what? I don't have knee pain. Take substance over form any day. And, at this age, I'm so over about how I look to other people anyway, right? So let's check out the profile view. I've got a slow motion clip here. Here's a snapshot, and it does look like I'm landing on the forefoot, which is a good thing. But am I still overstriding? Here's another snapshot. It looks like my foot is landing a little bit in front of my hips. Is that good? Am I still overstriding, or is it okay? I don't know. So YouTube fam, I need some help. If there are any runners out there, any running coaches, let me know how this looks. If there are ways I can improve, am I running correctly? Is my form okay? But again, I'm relatively pain-free, which is good. But can I improve some more? Let me know in the comments below. So that brings me to the end of this video. Come back next week. I'll review what I'm doing for week 2. And I want to look at where I can find gains. I look at running as mitigating my downside, mitigating disaster. But where can I find gains? Where can I find minutes to cut down my time? That's what I'll cover next week. So until then, again, if there are any runners or running coaches out there, please let me have some feedback, any suggestions, and please give me a follow. See you next week.